Welcome to some fresh details and brand new gameplay for some upcoming new strategy, simulation, and city building games releasing this year in 2024. Let's jump in. Frostpunk 2 is where we'll start, and it's the only game that's getting a second mention from my last video, and that's because PC, Game Pass, and console players can rejoice with this brand new gameplay footage for what is undoubtedly one of the most anticipated city builder come survival strategy games to release in 2024. At the time of recording, this gameplay is brand new, and I'm going to slow down these sections where they show the UI and the actual game being played so that you can take them in a little bit better. We don't need to see nonsense in this video, and my goal is to not waste any of your time. And the goal of Frostpunk 2 is to keep the city alive. It must survive. Set roughly 30 years after an apocalyptic blizzard completely ravaged Earth, Frostpunk 2 is very much a city builder with districts, industry, science, and all of that kind of stuff. But on top of that is a complex political layer, where in this post-apocalyptic setting, as you can imagine, human nature starts to shine through, and different, often perhaps warring or at least in conflict with one another factions emerge, and you, as the head or steward of the council, have to try and decide and influence the way that things will pan out. It's a hardcore survival game if it'll be anything like the original, and like I say, it's probably one of the most anticipated games for 2024. Prison Architect 2 is up next, in the second spot on this video, releasing on the 27th of March this year to consoles and PC. This was a fairly surprise announcement when I was putting together this video. What is the big change from Prison Architect 1? That wonderful, if not slightly buggy game where you design a prison. It's a tycoon game, essentially. Well, in case you can't tell already, it's 3D. Prison Architect has received a huge glow up as we move through now into playing the second version of the game. Here, of course, you are tasked with basically establishing and running a prison, setting its policies, determining how different inmates potentially relate with one another. Speaking of which, they claim that the inmates will be the smartest ever. They now form distinct relationships and influence the behavior of one another based on their wants and needs. And it's also promising a career mode that will take you across a world map, allegedly refreshed, and lots more added to it. And finally, of course, we can expect new tools and such to go along with the upgrades to Prison Architect 2. Very exciting. Next up, the aptly named Colonize, set to release in early access sometime in 2024. Colonize is a real-time strategy, as you can imagine, colony simulation game. The points of difference here are that it's set in and around the 17th century, that colonization period. And the task, of course, gather resources, survive, so on and so forth, but in this case, across 6 different cities that we're tasked to populate. Each city will expand, depending, of course, on things like the difficulty of the game, the climate, expeditions that you may go out on, and the size of the ships that you use to trade with England. There's also a strong management underpinning this game. I think it should be a goodie. Next up, Espiocracy, releasing sometime in 2024. I'm pretty excited about this grand strategy, real-time simulation game, purely fixed and focused on the Cold War, running I think from 1946 right the way through to 2020. Here you choose one of, get this, 74 different countries and engage in all kinds of, as you guessed, espionage, political activity that you might expect, like whether nations will win or lose wars, suffer coups, leadership changes, foreign interference, you name it. All of that political Cold War activity, of course, set on the backdrop of things like nuclear weapons, the space race, war and decolonization. I think this will have a lot to offer. I anticipate it'll act a bit like the strategy layer inside of Terra Invicta if you've played that space game, also published by Hooded Horse, although of course here with a pure and slightly more stripped down focus. I can't wait to see more gameplay whenever it's revealed for Espiocracy. And while we're on the Hooded Horse train, here's Nova Roma, New Rome, releasing sometime in 2024 on PC. This is a city builder with, as you can see, a very distinct look and feel to it. The idea being that the Roman Empire is collapsing and a band of citizens have reached out, looking further to a new land to build a new Rome. Now, one of the key things that they tend to show a lot of in the trailer is how you interact with water in particular, from aqueducts to floods. Of course, at its base, it's a city building game, and surrounding that are needs as well. Needs for citizens, military needs, and resource management needs too. So there's also that kind of sprawling city element here of just reaching out to one more deposit, just reaching out for a little bit more stone, or whatever it may be. This new Nova Roma has certainly captured my interest. I'm looking forward to hearing more. Though maybe not quite as much interest as Life by You, releasing on the 6th of March, a release early access date that I think was brought forward from what was initially intended to be September of this year. Life by You is published by Paradox, developed by Paradox Tectonic, and as you can tell, it's essentially their answer to The Sims. It's a simulation life sim game. You name it. It'll be really interesting to see just how this game lands on release. King's Orders, hopefully releasing sometime in 2024 on PC, is a political, tactical strategy game where you send out, as the name suggests, orders. And it's this orders-based mechanic and the time delays, or indeed the risks that those orders will be tampered with or destroyed, that are the big factor in this game. Set on a European map during the Middle Ages, the task here is to expand your influence, claim new territories, and play through certain scenarios or campaigns based, indeed, around real conflict that took place during the Middle Ages in Europe. The task here is therefore one both of military and politics, as you take more of a bird's eye view over the game, delivering orders and outlaying your grand plan to conquer Europe during the Middle Ages. You'll send troops out alongside your messages and then hope for the best as you cross your fingers and hope for a good outcome. A perhaps more unique setting comes to Celestial Empire, releasing in March 2024. Here we play in ancient China, inside of this resource-oriented city builder game, largely set in a sandbox world. It's of course a simulation game as well. You'll need to meet the needs of your populations and the growing demands of a city. Trade is carried out across the Silk Road, where you can engage in trade routes and cooperate with other settlements. Ultimately, you are a governor appointed by the emperor, and so it's the emperor's will and demands that'll somewhat dictate the kinds of things you need to do. The other factor are supernatural forces that you need to sort of build positive relationships with to provide benefit to your citizens, or alternatively face the darker side with demons spreading fear across your land. An interesting take. Tempest Rising is the next game on my list, and this one introduces more of an action-oriented strategy element. It's a war game and a real-time strategy game though at its core. It's set in kind of an alternate history, somewhat modern scenario, and inside of it there'll be 3 distinct factions that you can choose to play. Each one of course has its own units. One of the other big focuses here is multiplayer. Unlike a lot of the other entries in this list, this game is also trying to lean into that competitive multiplayer space. In this post-nuclear war setting on Earth, you might also be happy as a single player too though. There are 2 11-mission campaigns alongside skirmishes, custom games, and of course, ranked multiplayer stretching back there too. Next on my list is Viking City Builder. And the name kind of gives it away, right? I probably don't need to spend much time telling you that this, my friends, is a city building game with a Viking setting. What does it do that's different then? Let's talk about its selling points. It's about conquering those European lands with your wonderful Norse armies, building settlements and managing resources in a real-time strategy setting, and surviving and fighting. It's also, of course, about managing a settlement, assigning tasks to your different workers, citizens, different professions, ultimately shaping your economy. We haven't seen a lot about the combat other than a brief teaser inside of this trailer, so I'm going to have to reserve quite a bit of judgment on this game until we hear more about how that plays out, but I think nonetheless it's worthy of a mention here. And that, my friends, concludes this video with some more new, upcoming, hopefully pretty exciting strategy games. If you're thinking, where's Manor Lords? Where's Millennia? What about Ara Ara? I was really looking forward to spamming that in the comments. Don't worry, I've covered those in a separate video, which I'll link below. Thank you for joining me, everybody. I always look forward to seeing your recommendations in the comments. Indeed, some of the mentions in this video were from that previous one's comments. So thank you for watching and contributing, and I'll see you next time.